an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering One Piece, episodes 536 through 538. Showdown in Ryugu Plaza, Zorro versus... It says Hody, and I think that must be the translation, but Hordy is the one I am unfortunately familiar with. 357, Protect Shirahoshi, Deccan's Pursuit. And then the crew is defeated. Hody controls the Ryugu Palace. Guys, I really want to start using Hody instead. Pretty please. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Florian once again for commissioning this episode, and once again for being patient after I got a back injury and had to push back the recording. So apologies, guys, if you hear me moving around more than usual because I'm trying to get comfortable. Last episode I recorded, I actually did standing because that was more comfortable. But I just can't stand for, 4 hours standing in one place, staring into a screen. It's just, I have to mix it up a little bit. So guys, these episodes there's a lot of, I'm trying to think of the way to, describe this. I guess farcical might be the right way because there's a ton of random people around town who are seeing what's going on with the Straw Hats and really leaping to some wrong conclusions. And it's not like they're just leaping to these conclusions and then when new material becomes available for them to educate themselves on what's going on, they just reconstruct the assumption they already have to match the information that they've been given. So there's a point where it should be pretty fucking clear that the princess is in good hands and wants to be with them, but they have just fully embraced this narrative of the Straw Hats being evil and terrible that makes me really, it's funny at times, but it can be so irritating to me because we've got Jinbei here who is seen as a legend, evidently, and I wish that he would, make himself useful by talking up their reputation a little bit more. Evidently, he has not done a whole lot to lay the groundwork, and I am assuming it's because he really thought that the message he sent of, please get out of here was going to be enough to drive them off, and then he wouldn't have to have established a reputation for them. But it's just knowing how close they are with somebody that the townsfolk respect. I'm oh, y'all are just one conversation away from this being fine. Well, let's begin at the beginning. Zorro versus Hordy. So, the whole, we have this standoff still happening in the palace, and the main thing we've got to figure out is how we are going to split everybody up out of here, because there's a lot of maneuvering that has to happen to get the players in place. And we're going to essentially be keeping most of the Straw Hats, except for Nami, in the palace, it seems. Nami has gone off on her own and then eventually starts heading for the Sea Forest. But Zorro and Hordy are doing their little showdown for pretty much all three of these episodes. So, the reveal about Hordy and how he joined up, it's an interesting, because he's told, how can somebody who used to work for the king have turned on him and become one of these people that's doing all of the raising unrest and whatnot in I keep wanting to say Fishtown, I'm sorry, guys. Fishtown is like a spot in Philadelphia that Brendan and I looked at quite closely to like live in. So every time I want to say Fishman Island, it just turns into Fishman or Fishtown like halfway out of my mouth. So we get Horty's like reaction to being shamed here, which is to basically be like, LOL. Yeah, I never felt like pride in the army. I wasn't actually interested in becoming part of this bullshit system. What I wanted to learn was to learn some combat skills, and that way I could take off and do whatever the fuck I felt like doing. And he says, the comforts of your royal palace has been blinding you to what's happening on this island. Ever since I was a child, as far back as I can remember, I've wanted to be a gangster. No, I'm just kidding. That's a different movie. I've seen fishmen oppressed by barbaric humans. And we have a flashback of somebody getting scooped up in a net, donsami, I think is the way it's said. And there's a bunch of humans with those like bubbles over their heads. It's sort of an interesting thing because this is a different setup than what we have seen thus far. We've had humans like fully coated or in bubbles, but the humans like walking around with bubbles over their heads is, I'm assuming like this is not Fishman Island that this is happening on, because if they were walking around like this, it's been told to us that like the water pressure is crushing, that part of the physics of this world is still valid. So I don't know if it's meant to be like they are within Fishman Island, but they're just in a part that has water. And why are they able to walk and not be floating? There's a lot about this flashback that I was sort of like, I don't know exactly how this works here. And this group of kids are all like leaping forward saying, give us back our friend. And it's really, they look like the three kids in Nightmare Before Christmas. And it's, you know, that little group that's dressed up in costumes that's friends with the Oogie Boogie. But yeah, this dude just knocks them all on their asses. And since they're apparently, you know, not full-on mermen, they're not as valuable. But these guys will do them the favor of capturing them and selling them into slavery. No problem. And this is when Arlong turns up. And he's like, you pathetic shits. I've had about enough of you. We are so much stronger and more badass than you. And we have given you so many chances to, like, leave us the fuck alone. And you fucking don't. And he grabs these guys by the head bubbles and pops them so that they drown. And I gotta say, if the explanation as to why these guys are using only head bubbles when I don't think we've seen that before outside of like the royals, the celestial dragons, and that's on land, so that doesn't really count. If the explanation is simply that we wanted a badass moment where Arlong pops their head bubbles, I can't really be mad at that because it's a pretty great moment. And like, this is the thing about Arlong, is his grievance is very valid in terms of the way humans apparently have been treating fishmen. So I don't feel like this show is sort of trying to rewrite history or anything. And maybe when I get further into this, I'll start to feel that way a little bit, or maybe I'll just kind of side-eye some things, because like what I kept thinking here, for those of you who are like following the coverage that Rashawn and I are doing of the Hunger Games, we've just started reading A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and we're about halfway into it. And Rashawn is a little bit frustrated by what she like originally saw as maybe an attempt to humanize too much somebody who is a villain in the books in a way that was going to feel like I'm excusing their actions. And I feel pretty confident that by the time we're done with the book, she won't feel that way, that she'll understand that's not really what Suzanne Collins was trying to do. But the reason that she's concerned about it is because that can be a thing that is sometimes done in fiction. And it's almost like, to me, it's either you've run out of ideas, but you have to stick with this property. So you're going to try and be not write a redemption arc, but write something that's going to make everybody feel more sympathy than they ever would have expected. And so you want to surprise them with that. And sometimes that can feel really cheap. Or, and this is one that I just really don't like, the person who is writing it misunderstands what the viewer or reader will take as a explanation, because they'll try to use it almost as an excuse. So there'll be times where something is written as to be well, now the serial killer, now that you understand where he comes from, you can't really blame him for becoming a serial killer, can you? And it's no, yeah, you can. Yeah, plenty of people have gone through a lot of horrible shit and they don't turn out to be absolute monsters. So I don't get the feeling that's what we're doing here, but I have myself on guard for it a little bit. And yeah, he's just really admires Arlong a lot for the way that he handles these guys. And he even looks a little like Arlong. It's not really the, obviously his nose and whatnot are different, but he's got a similar sort of grayish tone and is jacked in the same way. And she says, yeah, I trained until I was strong enough to be Arlong's right-hand man. I dreamed of standing next to him when he conquered the East Blue. I did until you humans came along and crushed everything he worked for. And this is so funny, because the thing that Usopp says here isn't we were justified, he did bullshit stuff that was hurting people. That's not even what he is concerned with. I thought they may have just been defiant about it. But instead, he just says, "Ah, man, I thought we were done with Arlong. Can't you just let it go?" And honestly, I kind of felt that. I can't decide. I'll be honest with you guys. I can't decide how I feel about all the Arlong stuff being brought back up again. I think that I'm down for it because enough time has passed, and because what happened there was such a huge, what's the word I want? Formative situation for Nami. A canon event for those of you who have watched the Spider-Verse movie. But I have felt a little bit of oh boy, going into this, that it's a combo of the Arlong thing and just wanting that over and done with. And that this thing with the stimulant drug that they're taking, really feeling like a similar storyline to Moria, where you're going to overdo it and eventually it'll be really easy to beat you because you've completely burnt yourself out on this stuff. And so it just feels like two sort of easy, predictable, potential story beats. And I may be completely wrong about that. I may not be giving Oda enough credit here. It may turn out to be something really, really different, but I just wanted to tell you the sort of reservations I'm having as I'm watching it. And yeah, again, with Zorro being Arlong, and then in the background, you guys, Brooke just says, "What? Arlong?" And then he waves his hand and says, "Truthfully, I don't even know who Arlong is, but I didn't want to be left out, I am not tired of him still. So yeah, Usopp is just alright, so what are we gonna fucking do about this guy? And Horty says, alright, enough of this. Let's get down to business. And he puts his hand against the wall, and he uses a technique called shark grip. And he just breaks the whole, like, wall of the palace. It's marble. It looks like it's probably, like, 40 feet thick, because they're, like, really deep archways. And as this is breaking and cracking, Nami comes over to Kami and is like, hey, I need a favor. And we go outside the palace and we watch it shaking. I really liked all of the fish, the little guys who were like swimming around the palace, darting away. And he collapses it, and then all of this water begins pouring in. And it turns into a very different fighting like scenario than it did a moment ago. Apparently, Zorro can still just fight underwater. Here goes the other thing I'm sort of stuck on, guys, because I don't know what this show wants me to think again about, like, the physics and mechanics of water. They want me to simultaneously believe that all of the rules still apply for the tension, but then they want to do something like this where I'm just sort of like, how does this work, though? Like, honestly, the amount of time that he spends fighting Horty underwater is longer than the time he spent against the Kraken earlier when they got separated. So I don't really feel as if they needed those, like, cover bubbles, the coatings at all, because apparently they can just fight without taking breath for like 3 episodes in a row. So I don't understand it, y'all. It's very fast and loose, and like a lot of the time I can hand wave it, but there are times where I start to be like, you gotta at least like address this, It doesn't matter, whatever. So this is when we start seeing like the water rising and everybody freaking out, and nobody notices that Nami and Kami have taken off. The fucking little starfish guy, what's his name? Papagoo. He is the one who's just like, yeah, they fucking took off, guys. And he isn't even really like intending to fight or anything. He's just laying on his back crying about it. So Horty launches some water droplets. This is actually really cool. He what's the technique called here? Because I thought that this was actually really fun. Let's see. Shark arrows. That's what he says. Okay. It's really interesting too. When he like pulls his arm back to make this throw, we have his face and Arlong's face sort of overlaid on each other. And Zorro, it seems, is having like a bit of a flashback moment. So he sees him throw these, and the drops become really sharp in the air. And he's like, oh my God, he's going to hit those guards. And he darts in front of them, and Zorro deflects them all with the hilt of his sword. I don't know why, but I really like the fact that the sword hilt is what he uses instead of the blade. It's sort of like, for me, it gave the impression that either he doesn't think that the arrows are like important enough to block with his actual blade, or that he believes that they're going to be tough enough that they could actually dent the blade of his weapon, and he doesn't want to risk that. And I kind of prefer the second one, because that makes Horty more of a badass. If Zorro is sort of like, hold on, no, I'm not going to risk that, And I love the king here. He has all of these like guards underneath him, And he is so huge that when he realizes that this dude is targeting his guards, he just like folds his body down over them and creates a human shield. And it's just really sweet. He's like so desperate to help these guys. And of course, Horty is just like, oh, you really sacrificing yourself for those pawns just shows that you don't have what it takes to be a ruler. And I do, it's a little ham-fisted, but that is the sort of thing that I think a lot of people would feel. And a lot of us are like, no, but that's what makes a good king. And like, ideally, yes, but practically speaking, not really. It's sort of, I feel like all kinds of things about it, And this is when Zorro launches this like this attack that comes at them through the water like a shark fin. And instead of, Horty holds up one of his own guys in front of the blade. And the guy sees it coming and says, "Can't you just move out of the way?" I don't know why, guys, but that was like one of the most fucked up moments to me. He grabs this dude from next to him and just holds him up in front of him because he doesn't want to move. And I know it's meant to be, we're going to show the exact polar opposite of what our King Trident, what's his name? Is it King Trident? What he does. He's willing to sacrifice himself, and Horty is willing to sacrifice everybody around him. And that's, sure. But even knowing that's what we're doing, this very clear, obvious one-to-one comparison, I still found it like vaguely shocking. There was just something about how brutal it was, and the way he just holds him up with a straight arm, like he's really doing something here. And also putting that on, I don't feel like Zorro cares about killing a fishman. They're all enemies anyway. He would have been perfectly willing to like fight this guy in a battle if they were all just going to go into like a pitched battle right here. But it's a different feeling somehow for him to have been aiming for one guy and another dude to die. When it's that like specific a target he was trying for. So, and the way that Horty like looks at him, and they have those like red sparkles in his eyes a lot. I think that maybe, I can't tell if it's supposed to be like that's just the way Horty's eyes are, or if that's supposed to be an indicator of the drug in his system. I kind of thought that it was that second one, but I think maybe not, because I think about what his eyes look when he's really on that stuff, and they look very distinctly different. So I think that's the indicator, and the red light is just supposed to be like, because he has creepy eyes, So Zorro, he tells Usopp, our negotiation with the kingdom collapsed. We gave them our word to give them back all the hostages unarmed, and we couldn't keep that promise. And I love one of the guys is saying, they're so honest. And Usopp is like, all right, I'm on it. I'm going to, go ahead and untie them all. Meanwhile, as he's about to do that, this is when Brook almost falls off his back, because obviously this is seawater and he has a devil fruit power, so this isn't great for him. And this is when they notice that Nami has disappeared, because he's like, Nami, save me, because he's about to fall. But yeah, her and Kami have taken off. So this is when we go to the two of them and her holding on to Kami's shoulders and Kami swimming down the hall. Now, eventually, when they do decide that they're going to go to the sea forest, there is a shot of the two of them swimming away that felt like there was some monster fucking fiction happening in that moment. Like, I was just like, this feels really, really suggestive. But, what are we going to do with shows like this a lot of the time and two women? Like, it's unfortunately part of the whole way that a lot of this storytelling goes. But yeah, Brooke is trying to like help cut everybody out of these bonds, and the water is just really sapping his strength. So it's becoming more and more difficult. And this is when the fishmen are like, oh, they're trying to let them go. Don't let them pull this. And they start to attack. And Usopp uses one of his new little weapons. I'm going to go back real quick so that I can see what the name of it is. But yeah, here it is. Green Star Reflexia? I have no idea what that means. Well, no, maybe I shouldn't look it up. I was going to, because I thought maybe that was a real word. And then it occurred to me that maybe like a fandom specific word. And if I Google it, I may get some spoilers. So I'm not going to, but if anybody listening knows what that means, let me know. Cause yeah, I don't even remember if I'm pronouncing it right. But he shoots this like, what do you call it? Like it's a seed, but it looks like a giant walnut. And I know a walnut is a seed, but you know what I'm saying. And it explodes into this huge red flower. And all these dudes are standing looking at it, and they're just like, wait, what is that? That's kind of cool. And they start to really be like, wow. And then Usopp says, breathe deep. And all of this like pollen starts to pour out of it. Somebody yells, it stinks. And I was wondering if it was meant to be that corpse flower again, because I feel like I've mentioned that on here. But I couldn't tell what it really did. It seems like it just stopped them in their tracks and they didn't want to come closer because it stank. But it didn't seem to like do anything to them physically. Like, did it knock them out? Or it didn't seem like it. I feel like either I missed its effects or they weren't that extreme. But all right, so the I'm gonna jump ahead here because I'm realizing like how much time I've gone through. But there's a lot of stuff that I like wanted to touch on right out of the gate, as I am wont to do. And when Horty is fighting Zorro, he says something like, you know, Arlong was a badass fighter and everything, and I respect the hell out of him, but I have really gone past him. So if you think that fighting me is going to be anything like when you fought him, I'm sorry to disabuse you of that, but you don't stand a fucking chance. You're in the water. This is my house. And he keeps bragging like this, but it isn't feeling like he really does have the upper hand. The only thing that he's got are maybe weapons that are slightly more suited to water than Zorro's, and I'm not even so sure I would say that. And he does the arrow thing, and he says there's no deflecting my arrows in the water. I don't know why not. What does that mean? They're just drops. Why would it work any differently? Like, I don't really get what that... What Zorro does is he, like, creates a cyclone that catches them and spins them upward. I'm sorry, guys. I feel like I'm losing my voice. But Horty is like, well, if you're able to pull that off, I guess I can really let loose, which I actually enjoyed in terms of it being just an outright threat instead of it being like, oh, you were able to do that, and like being sort of like, aw, I thought I really had some here. Being like, oh, sweet. If you're able to like counter this, then I might be able to just really try some shit here, which that there's something about being simultaneously underestimated so that somebody isn't letting it all loose, like they're pulling their punches, but also then when it seems like you have more in your tank than they expected, they still don't take you seriously. They're just like, oh, good, I can do more of my little, like, training on you, basically, like using you as a tool. That is extra, extra insulting. So I'm trying to make sure that I stay. Oh, right. So this is part of the whole thing with the people who are living on this island seeing our friends as enemies. And it begins with everybody gathering around them in a circle, yelling about the mermaids that have been kidnapped and give them back. And Sanji, I love the way he plays this. He's like, look, I'm not trying to pretend that I wouldn't steal some mermaids. Like, this, I absolutely will want every mermaid for myself. I'm not trying to pretend but we didn't kidnap them. And the way that they have this animated is that he like turns into that goofy nose version of himself and has the huge heart eyes, and then immediately it slams back to him with his regular expression, which is very, I don't even know what to call it. It's just placid, you know? But it was funny. And somebody is like, you hear that? He just admitted that he wants them. And poor Chopper, when he says, would you guys please, we have a dying man over here, they start actually throwing stuff at Chopper, who, thank goodness, little guy is wearing like the equivalent of a helmet. But I really, really got mad about that. Sanji yells at them about it, but only because they threw a mostly full bottle of alcohol, and that's a waste. Which he's not wrong, but I feel like there's bigger fish to fry here, my friend. I thought he might like turn it into a moment where he like offered to cook something for everybody and just sort of distracted them. But this feels a little bit too serious to be handled in that kind of a manner. So this is when Luffy turns up. And it's so, guys, this whole thing with our little shark friend carrying Kami in his mouth, it's a bummer. I really hate how many animals Oda decides to make like harmed or uncomfortable in like, it just bums me out, man. This little shark is doing his best, and he is like choking and gagging, and tears are welling up, and he is sweating like crazy. The whole thing is just so sad to watch. And like, even when he is about to hurl her up, she's like, close your mouth, stop it, they can't see me. As soon as she says, they can't see me, hide me, I was like, oh, this is going to go really badly, because Luffy is going to deny everything. And then she, like, the shark is just going to go ahead and spit her out, and they're all going to think that he was lying. What I didn't expect, which I was really mad about, eventually it seems like she's sort of trying to take it back, but like not effectively enough, was the princess kind of going along with what everybody is assuming happened to her, which really sucks. So this, when the shark like is choking on her and then spits her out, I love the shadow that is cast on everybody below. And I don't think any of them have like ever seen her before, because they're genuinely shocked at how humongous she is. But the way that they all are seeing this is like, oh, of course, he was trying to keep her hidden in there, but she's been kidnapped. And then at one point when she tries to say something and Luffy replies, she begins crying, and they assume that because she was crying that Luffy is the bad guy. She does it like, oh, good job, you found me. Like, that to me really sounded like she was saying, yeah, this vicious kidnapper, you know? I was just deeply, deeply disappointed in her. Meanwhile, Chopper gets very, very concerned about Sanji, whose back is turned to the whole thing. And we get this scene, you guys, where Chopper tries to convince Sanji not to turn around because he'll die from horniness if he sees the mermaid princess. the episode ends on that note, like it's this huge cliffhanger. I don't think a single one of us ever doubted he was going to turn around, right? Like, we all knew that had to happen. There was just no way. So eventually, he does. And she is too much for him to accept. And he turns to stone as if Boa Hancock were there. Even though I don't know that this is something we have ever seen anybody do before. It's just this spontaneous thing while his eyes are hearts and a heart is coming out of his mouth and out of his chest. It's really, truly freakish, actually. But pretty much the whole rest of these 2 episodes is him as a solid stone. You know what? I accept that. I feel like Sanji has just been so annoying so far that if we're going to do something to just sort of get him out of the way and out from everybody's hair, I can't help but support it. If we need him in the fight later, it will be a bummer for him to be laid up like this. I wouldn't be surprised if it turns out that, like, being kissed brings him back to life or something. But I don't want to see Sanji falling all over himself for this princess. I really don't. I just, you know, it's been hard enough to sort of reconcile how much I like Sanji in some ways to his, like, creepiness, and the way they've dialed everything up and added the, like, sort of bigotry to it. I just kind of want him to be off the board for now. I really wonder, y'all, how he's going to be played in the show, because we have had so little of him around women that we really haven't had all that, like, extreme a reaction. He has tried to flirt with Nami. He has put himself forward when she's, like, looking for a hug so that we can have her walk past him and ignore him. All of that is actually pretty mild. But how do you have a character like this that isn't just real gross when you do it in live action? And I'm not trying to say like this in terms of this arc, because they're not doing this arc, I'm just going to assume. At least not, I shouldn't say it that way. I'm saying that I don't think Sanji is going to wind up in the live action spending a bunch of time on an island with cross-dressers and then come back even hornier and, like, with this gross transphobic thing going on. I don't think they would ever go down that road. But his horniness is such a major part of his character. And how do you make that a character trait without it just coming across as, this is a guy you shouldn't let on your team? This guy's problematic, actually. He's sexually harassing all of your female crewmates, and y'all need to say something to him because this is inappropriate. You know, like, how do you cope with, because the way he has been is, it just wouldn't fly. So I'm really, really interested in that. I know that the show got renewed for another season, but I haven't heard anything about progress with filming or anything. So I'm going to look into that. But anyway, yeah, so that's in summary. He decides that if he's going to die, that's how he wants to die, of course. So he turns around, looks at her. Then we have this moment where Zorro slices the chains that have been keeping the king down and is like, get those guys out of here for me. As for me, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to fight this dude. And we get a pretty good line from Horty where he says, there's a revolution coming and you're in the way. And I don't know, I kind of liked that. I felt like it was a high impact sort of line that I could see being used in something more serious. So, oh God, I forgot how long it takes for Sanji to turn to stone. Christ. So then we've just got Hachi, who is on the shore and, you know, passed out and fucked up. And Luffy, he gets got by all of these mermen, well, fishmen, because they think that he stole the princess, and they tie him up. They tie up Hachi, and one of the fishmen actually comes up to Hachi and is like, "Oh, I remember you. You used to be one of Arlong's goons, didn't you?" And I don't know why, because there really isn't evidence for this, but I had sort of wondered if everybody else felt about Arlong the way that humans do, because Arlong was kind of wanting to overthrow humans, and I thought maybe people would be a little bit more on board with that. But they seem to be of the view that Arlong is as bad as the humans think he is, So anyway, this is when Luffy tries to, he says to the fishmen, "Hey, what's flying at us?" And they think that he's just saying anything to distract them. But then they look up and there's a piece of coral with somebody on it, and they realize, oh, it's Vanderdecken with his weird fucking 4 legs, 2 arms self. And he is coming at this princess to try and kill her. And everybody is rightfully like, what the fuck, though? I thought you wanted to marry her, or I thought you were trying to kill her. What do you mean you want to marry her? Do you really think she would want to after all this? Which is unfortunately something that probably certain people would still want because they're bonkers. So, But he's coming down and he says to the princess, "Will you marry me? It's either yes or death. If you truly wish to live," and there's this wild animation, "then you'll marry me." And she says, "You're just not my type." Which, honestly, in the circumstances, was a pretty funny line. Just so, casual, just the way, regretfully, "I had a nice time tonight. You're a really nice guy, but I'm not really feeling it, So I think that, and he is first devastated. Everybody around her is like, "He's not your type? That's your only reason?" I was like, that's not really her only reason. I mean, nobody said that. But Vanderdecken, for his part, he calls her a tramp. "Then who is your type, huh? After you've led me on for 10 whole years. If you refuse to love me, I refuse to let you exist." Guys, Vanderdecken is an incel and a probably a public place shooter. And he is very, very frightening all of a sudden. He turned a corner here for me. And I think the only thing that's keeping him from feeling truly icky is that he just seems like he isn't really human. I don't know if he's meant to be a fish man, because the way he looks, he's got webbed fingers and stuff, but the 4 legs, that doesn't feel fishy to me. I don't really know it. I have to assume he is, but the whole design of him just kind of doesn't feel like that. So this is, again, when Luffy is saying, "I can't protect you if you run away," to the princess, because, this dude is continuing to throw these axes. And I love this. He looks at the people around him and he says, "I'm really sorry about this, guys. Nothing personal, but you're in my way." And just as he says, "in my way," he uses his haki to knock all of them out. He busts right up out of these ropes, and he does a spin in the air, and kicks the hell out of Vanderdecken. And he, like, when I say that he breaks out of his ropes, I mean only his legs. His arms are still tied to his sides. And I just have to say that my headcanon is that he needs his legs free, but he doesn't think that Vanderdecken is going to be enough of a challenge that he has to bother undoing his arms. So, and he starts second gear, I think this one is, and Luffy grabs him between his feet and has him like all twisted up and lifts him up and like out. They're like in midair, and he does Gum Gum Jet and just slams Decken, or Jet Hammer, that's what it is, slams Vanderdecken head first into the ground and creates essentially a crater from this man's head. It's pretty great. This is like, I know that if Vanderdecken gets up, I know that we're still going to have to deal with him, but in the moment, part of me was just like, Luffy, can you please come over here and just slit this man's throat and have it be done? You know, I wish Luffy understood about the Mark fruit and how it works, because I think when he was down, if you had just taken off his glove, that maybe that would like solve the problem. But, well, it wouldn't solve the problem of Vanderdecken coming after her, because he would just try and find another way to touch her again. But it would at least really interfere with him being able to find her and track her down. I love when he yells at the shark to pull it together. Oh, Sanji is like back. Oh, I forgot. You guys, I didn't remember that he became conscious again. I thought he was still out. I'm bummed. And yes, Sanji is just still rolling around thinking about the mermaid princess and how his dream came true. It's the second time he has said that his dream has come true. And once again, we have Chopper saying, I thought your dream was to find the All Blue. And once again, Sanji doesn't respond to that. So I guess either Sanji's attachment to the All Blue has sort of dissipated, or he has decided to replace that with this just because of proximity, which I can understand why you might do that. But yeah, so then when the princess unties Luffy, I did feel like he should be able to break that himself. If he was able to break his legs, the fact that he needed help, I didn't really get. But then we have the princess climbing onto the shark's back, and she swims away holding it by the side of its mouth. Guys, can this shark please get a break? Like, hold on to his fin, or use some rope to tie around his waist. Something else. Do we need this? I don't like it. It makes me very sad. This is when that friggin' sea bonds comes up out of the ocean. I had really forgotten this guy, and I was like not sure that he could even breathe outside of the ocean. I think I just expected him to be that was his home, and he didn't leave it. But evidently he's going to do what Vanderdecken says, and I'm not really sure what kind of link they have and why he's willing to do this stuff for him. But he begins to attack because Vanderdecken says to lay them all out, and Luffy does second gear pistol, punches him in the eye. It seems like the punch in the eye knocked out a tooth. It didn't feel to me like it looked like he punched him in the tooth, but must have. And this poor guy goes down with a broken tooth. Like, that's real painful. You know, I really felt for him. This little dude is such a goober. Just, leave him alone. Why are you making him do this stuff? I don't think he even understands what he's doing. So, right. We have the pirate hangout, which is actually really, really cool looking on the outside. I thought it was nicely designed. I'd forgotten about it. But the conversation... Oh, no, wait, was that... I thought it... Or was that the outside of the palace? Maybe that was a palace. I thought I'm sorry, guys. I'm trying to jump around a little bit here and make sure that I cover everything because I'm like really out of time already. But okay, it was the palace. My bad. Nami is talking to Kami about whether or not it was like ethical to leave those other guys behind. And, you know, she says they could take care of themselves. And Kami is like, yeah, no, I believe that. But, you know, Horty is like really very strong and he's ruthless. And when Nami tries to tell her how much her friends have grown and how much stronger they are over the past 2 years, it seems like Kami just sort of drops it, but I don't know if she's actually convinced. So let's see. Nami says, it's weird if Hachi was able to like visit when he was part of Arlong's crew, and now this Horty guy is presenting himself like the second coming of Arlong. And Jinbei made a point to warn Luffy not to fight him, and now I'm pretty sure I know why that is. He was trying to keep him safe. And let's make sure, let's hope that Zorro doesn't push him too far. And I really want to meet Jinbei, so let's go to the Sea Forest and find this guy. The fight with Zorro is, it's honestly like, I found it a little boring. I really hate to say that because like it's a fight between two badasses underwater, which should be cool. But I just think that if I had imagined how this was going to go, the underwater part would have felt a little bit more significant. And because they're inside a building underwater, there's no like other fish, there's no coral or rocks or seaweed to like utilize in the practical way that I think would make a fight like this sort of interesting to watch. It's just them each throwing blows back and forth at each other like they're in a video game. So the overall, like, you know, battle between the two of them, I'm not really that interested in doing the blow by blow. And I'm trying to see, because Zorro is blocking all of these things, and at one point, Horty uses this like ability to spin in a geyser right up behind Zorro very suddenly, and like knocks him down. And poor Usopp, who is underwater watching this, he can't help but yell Zorro's name and then realize that he's like drowning and swim to the surface as fast as he can. And I couldn't help but laugh because I was like, I could definitely see myself doing that, forgetting that I'm underwater and just trying to fucking talk like a normal person. So Horty says, finally, you miserable, worthless primate, your era is at an end. And he comes at Zorro. Zorro draws a sword just as the trident hits. And then Usopp surfaces, grabs a breath. Excuse me, guys. I don't know what's up with my throat. He goes back under the water and he sees all this blood. And he instantly starts yelling, Zorro, no. Because he thinks that it's Zorro's blood, which is actually really, really rude. And then you see that it's Horty. Zorro is okay. And he's actually sheathed his sword as he makes his blow, like in the same motion. Which honestly is kind of badass. Like, that's pretty dope. So, I'm trying to... Oh my god, you guys. Neptune? This dude... He says something about how, like, I hope that my back doesn't give out when I need it most. And guys, if I could just, for a moment, I know I'm over time, but this back injury that I'm dealing with, it's like, I've had moments where I've thrown my back out, you know, as an old, and I've done that, and it's been painful and really, like, feels so strange. But what this is, the doctor thinks it's either a slip disc or a muscle spasm. And seems to think it's more likely it's just a spasm. My friends, when I tell you that this pain was beyond anything I have ever experienced, I felt so bad. Owen was having to help me like in and out of bed. I couldn't even lift my leg, and I was... The first morning when I was trying to get out of bed, even with his help, it took like 5 or 6 tries, and I was sobbing by the end of it because the pain was so bad. I just get it, sir. I understand. Like, this is... There's... The limitations on our bodies are so frustrating. And even, like, the king has seemed to keep himself in pretty good shape, and he can't help but age. I have not been trying to keep myself in very good shape. So it's not surprising that this is happening so early for me, and I really do need to get it together if I don't want to be living like this with this kind of pain all the time. But anyway, I just had to get onto that, and from a personal note. So all of the fishmen, after seeing their man go down, they begin trying to come at Zorro, and they're doing it in this weird 3-dimension, I guess... forward, what do you call it if they're able to come from like above and below? But they are really determined that even if he got their boss, they can at least take him out because he's a human and he's been underwater for quite a while, and probably there isn't going to be a way for him to keep fighting with all of them and not drown. So this is when he uses 36 caliber Phoenix, single swipe of his sword, and they all go flying. And then he does indeed surface. Now, the fact that he surfaces the way he does, it's just really funny because they say more than once, like, there's no way out. And the way that it's drawn, you can't really see the surface, like, above him. So I was sort of going, did they, like, push him into a spot where the water goes all the way up to the ceiling and there isn't a way out? But no, he's temporarily, he's fine. And the king says, come here and hold on so that we may flee together. And this is when he's noting something about the way that these guys have been fighting is making me think that their strength is not natural, because my army is very skilled and they have been able to take them out in a way that shouldn't be possible. He tosses Usopp something that will give him some air. It didn't look like coral to me, but maybe I was wrong. Maybe I missed it. And they make a getaway here. This is how, like, it all, because Horty ends up with the palace, like, completely under his control. The guards leave with the 2 sort of prime minister types. The king begins to, like, pass out. It seems like he has suffered a terrible injury. So they're about to, like, bail with everybody, but he says, this is the end, I'm afraid. And I was like, he is not. Is he dying here? Like, that really sucks. And then here comes, I think, Hoe, but it just looks like Ho. And I feel like I don't want to call this very dignified whale Ho. It just seems really disrespectful. I don't know. But he comes and uses his body with, like, a rope around it so that the king can grab it and he will pull them all through the water. As they're going, somebody puts their hand on his tail and begins to pull him back. And they turn around, and here's this fucking asshole Horty yet again. I am tired of this man already. Really am. And he has taken some more of that fucking drug, and his eyes are quite bloodshot. And the king just lets go of the rope and remains and lets all of his guys get away, but stays in the palace with Usopp and Zorro. I felt so bad about this. I really thought they had found a way out. And everybody is just like, what do? We can't just leave the king. But Neptune is yelling. I kept trying to call him King Trident because that's from Little Mermaid. But he yells out that I told you to retreat. That was an order. If you guys get out of here, all hope is not lost. And Horty just lets them go. Soldiers who can't protect their king are no threat to us. Unfortunately, I feel like that's kind of true at the moment, but, short-sighted ultimately, I'm sure. It looks like the bubble that was over Zorro's head is gone, so he may be kind of drowning here, which sucks. Those head bubbles. And then we have this brief, cut over to another pirate. So first there's a check-in with the prince, and he's sort of trying to figure out where the rest of the Straw Hat pirates are. Then there's another dude who says, let's see, I'm trying to find it because he's Karos. That's him. He says, this is a mess. And he's got 6 arms, I think. Why couldn't Dosen wait for the rest of us? I know he's eager to fight, but the whole point was to attack every place at once. Whatever, no point in complaining now. Who's Dosen? No, he's got 8 arms. My bad. And he turns to his people and yells this is the day, mates, we're doing it. And they all cheer for him. And I was like, wait, is he with Horty or not? I think he must be. Dosen must be one of Horty's second in commands or something. But this is when we go on over to the sea forest. And I'm just going to jump right to the main issue here. There's first of all, just real briefly, I want to mention at least one joke. Because there's Den is on the Sunny, and Luffy sees him up there and is like, hey, that's my ship, buddy. What are you doing on there? Get off. And when Frankie says, oh, that's Den, Tom's brother, actually, the shipwright, he's doing the recoding. Luffy says, oh, okay then, why didn't you just say so? He lives in a den and he's recoding your brother for you, huh? And there's this long pause, and Frankie finally just gives him a thumbs up and says, sure, close enough, I guess. And it cuts over to Den, who's just blinking. That was a really funny joke. But anyway, jumping to the heart of the matter, Jinbei is here, and the episode ends with him, first of all, apologizing to Luffy for, not stopping Arlong, and then revealing that he let Arlong loose when Arlong was, imprisoned somewhere. And that's how it ends, with just Nami looking at him like he has just cut Luffy's throat right in front of her. And I have to assume there's a good reason for this, but sir, you really do got some splaining to do. So I'm super curious what that could be. Alright guys, I'm so sorry that I'm such a mess this episode. I don't know what's going on. I feel like my body is falling apart. But I appreciate you listening. I appreciate all your patience. Thank you, Florian, for commissioning this. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.